Hello, friends, and good evening. I know I don't normally do intros to videos, but I wanted to do one on this video specifically, because this may not be your favorite video by me. My voice is not all there, but I'm going to try. I'm going to get through this video and I'm going to make it work. But I wanted to give you a heads up that this is what I sound like right now. And if that doesn't appeal to you, then please do not feel like you are expected or forced to watch this video in any way, shape, or form. That said, this is a collection of birthday stories. I wanted to get this out last Friday, which was actually my birthday, but I had no voice at all, so that was not an option. But I'm going to do my best here. I'm going to put this together. I'm going to record these stories for those that sent them in, or the people who wrote them, and it's going to be a fun video. But again, if you don't like how my voice sounds, I completely understand. Just know that this is not the norm, and I get it. It's okay. Hopefully my next video, tomorrow, will be better. We'll see. But of course, enjoy. It has become an ongoing joke in my family that my birthdays are cursed. Just about every year, something happens on my birthday. Be it weird, disastrous, creepy, frustrating. There was just always something memorable there. I wasn't upset about it, though. Maybe as a kid, I probably took it differently, but now, as an adult, I just grow to expect it. And I can't even get mad about it anymore. I wanted to share some of the weirder incidents that occurred, though. For this story, I have to explain my appearance, at least as a young child. My uncle always poked fun at me, calling me pretty boy. I had super curly blonde hair. Trimming it was always difficult to do, partially because I had troubles holding still, and also because it was hard to make it even, I suppose. I also have bright green eyes. I still have the bright green eyes, and some people thought that I edited my pictures because of how they looked. I also had pale skin, but freckles everywhere. Both of my parents are gingers. I don't know where the blonde hair came from, though. So, when my parents took me to places like the doctors, or to get my hair cut, or to even get family photos taken, they always made comments about how adorable I was, and confused me for a girl. That didn't stop them from saying I should be in pageants, or that I would be great as a model. Just weird stuff like that. My parents just kind of took the comments in stride, thanked them, and moved on. As a young child, I didn't understand what they were talking about, but it did get annoying as I grew up, which is actually why I started shaving my head. Anyways, so for one of my birthday parties as a kid, my parents took me to this local arcade place. It was kind of like Chuck E. Cheese, but without the animatronics and with more games. They had a few entertainers that were there on random days too. There was a balloon guy one time that made balloon animals and hats. There was another guy that did magic tricks, and another that played a bunch of different musical instruments at the same time. So, there were a couple of people like that there as well. All in all, the party itself was great up until the end. My mom was talking to another parent, and I told them that I wanted more nuggets before we left, or something like that, and she told me to wait or ask my dad. I looked around as much as a kid would, and when I couldn't find him, I decided to just wander off to see if I could find some tokens on the ground or games to play. While I was pretty much crawling on the ground, a woman crouched down next to me holding a token and asked me if I was looking for it. I smiled and took it from her, and then remembered looking around for my favorite game to play. It was this game where you were a bear and you had to basically use a steering wheel as a controller to go left and right to catch apples in your mouth. I had won a lot of tickets from it before, So I usually spent most of my tokens on it, expecting it to work again. As I walked over to it, this woman followed me and again crouched down to be at eye level with me. She told me happy birthday, and I asked her how she knew, and she said because she was invited, as she was part of my family. I asked who she was, since I didn't recognize her, and all that she said was that she was my aunt, my dad's sister. That was all the verification I really needed at the time, so I said hi and continued playing the game. After a few minutes, she asked me where my parents were, and I said that I couldn't find my dad, and my mom was talking to someone else. She then made comments about how pretty I was, and that I could make a lot of people happy. Confused by this, I asked her what she meant, and she vaguely talked about other mommies and daddies that wanted a kid to make them happy too. I remember at this point thinking, cool, I don't know what I have to do with any of this, so I continued to play the game. She then asked if I would like to go with her to meet new moms and dads, and I said that I liked mine, but she said that I wouldn't have a choice anyways, because they're going to be having another kid, which meant that I wasn't making them happy anymore. And this is where she got my attention. I was scared that I was in trouble, or that my parents didn't really love me anymore. And she told me that's why I needed to go with her now, so that way I could pick my new parents. Through tears and heartbreak, I agreed and took her hand as we walked out of the building. I heard screaming as we left, but didn't pay any attention to it at the time, until I clearly heard my dad's booming voice yell my name. I looked up to see him running towards us, and the woman yanked on my arm, nearly dragging me as she ran towards her van. She tried shuffling to open the door, but my dad had caught up to us, grabbing her by the wrist and pulling me back and telling me to go to my mom. I shuffled back towards her as I saw her in the doorway crying, and she grabbed onto me tightly. My dad was then yelling at this woman, asking who the hell she was, all while she was begging him to let her go. And the cops showed up, and I was brought back inside with my mom as they talked to my dad. I told them what the lady had told me, and they explained that none of that was true. And they said people don't have more kids because they don't want the ones they already had, but that it could be just because they wanted more kids to love, things like that. My mom also told me that she started looking for me at some point in time that I was playing the game, since it was towards the front, and she was more in the back by the prize room. That was when she saw me walking out with the woman, and she could tell that I looked sad or scared. My dad was also talking to someone but was closer to the front, so my mom yelled at him and pointed towards me. And that was when my dad took off toward us. I don't know whatever happened to that lady, but let me tell you my surprise and fear when I learned about a week or two later that my parents were having another kid. They may have had to have calmed me down a bit on that one. Again, now it's a joke in the family when something happens that they're just going to trade me in, even now at 27. Another event that occurred was at my birthday party at around age 14, I think. I handed out invitations to those that I wanted to go in between classes. If I didn't give them to everyone in the classroom, then the teacher wouldn't let us pass them out, to be fair. I was limited on the amount of people I could invite, which was fine, because there wasn't a huge list of people I really wanted to be there anyways. In fact, there was this one kid that I was semi-friends with. We'll call him Chad. Chad was actually a new student, so no one really knew him there, but he quickly tried to fit in with different cliques to make friends. At least he tried, instead of just sitting there every day waiting to be invited to something. I can at least give him that. However, his personality His jokes and just some of his demeanor, it was just weird, and maybe a little above our age. Some of us had crushes and boyfriends or girlfriends, sure, but he was very sexual with his comments. Like, way more colorful and in-depth than what you would expect a 13 or 14-year-old to know about or to say. Like, even for me and my friends being raunchy, it was uncomfortable. So I didn't really hang out with him outside of school. Therefore, I also didn't initially invite him to my party, and didn't really think twice about it either. What I didn't realize, though, was that my mom knew his mom from the PTA meetings, and he, of course, was a completely different kid around my mom. She saw this kind and polite boy that was new to the community, and thought maybe that I just didn't know him enough and invited him to my party. Yay. My party was on a Saturday, and she decided not to bring this up until the Friday before. I explained to her that he was weird, but at that age, I think I was too embarrassed to repeat some of the things that he had said or done. So she just said that I should get to know him, and that this was the best way to do it. Not that I had a choice, but I reluctantly agreed. Enter the day of the party. Everything was going great. My friends all showed up and we were having a great time. My little sister was 6 or 7, so she was occupied with her own toys and games and being watched by my grandmother for the most part. Then, Chad showed up. It was normal at first. He came over, said hi. He had brought a present and acted normal, threw out cake and ice cream and the games. Then, when we were all left to our own devices, I was just hanging out in our tree with my friends. We had a little ladder set up that we could climb the trunk and just sit up in the tree. Chad joined us, and he made some weird comments about the few girls that were there that I'm not willing to repeat. At the time, I did have a crush on one of them, so I didn't like it, and I basically told him to stop because it was messed up. That's when he made a similar comment about my little sister. At that point, I could tell my friends were uncomfortable too, so I remembered telling him that he was gross, that was my little sister, and that was why no one liked him around. It was awkward for a moment, but Chad then jumped out of the tree, still smiling as he made a motion like he was shooting himself in the head, and then walked off into my house. My friends all had mixed reactions to it, but we just tried to move on. After a while of us not seeing him come back out, I decided to go check on him to make sure he wasn't doing something weird, when I started hearing my mom and grandma shouting back and forth about something. They sounded scared, so I went to find them, to see them banging on the door to my sister's room, and my sister crying from the other side of it. When my mom noticed me standing there, she yelled at me to go get my dad, so I ran off to find him. And we both ran back to my sister's room where my grandma was now on the phone with 911, and my dad immediately started body slamming the door. He finally broke it down, and he was hit with a bunch of smoke. Something in the room had caught fire and the door was locked, and no one knew how it happened. My grandma felt really bad for the longest time because she thought that she may have accidentally locked it when she left the room. But it was one of those knobs that you have to push in and turn, so you couldn't really do it by accident. She also typically left the door open in case she woke up or something and could hear her coming out. After the police came and they all talked about it, they determined that the fire was intentionally set after finding candle wax and a burnt stuffed animal. And there was also something else that was part of the origin of the fire, but I don't remember it now. Also, it was just by her toy chest and dresser, which is why there was so much smoke, but thankfully it didn't damage much other than her toys, some of her clothes, and then part of the wall. Anyways, after all this, we had to end the party, and have people go home early, all while having to explain to the parents why this was happening. My mom was eyeballing all of my friends trying to figure out who could have done it. It was pretty terrifying as well as embarrassing, having your mom pretty much interrogate your friends and their parents. After everyone was gone, then they talked to me about what had happened and told me because of how serious of a situation it was. We had to think about who all went in and out of the house, asked me if I thought or knew anyone that would try anything like that, and so forth. And that's when, going through the order of things, I had mentioned Chad going into the house, and I went in there after a while since he hadn't come out. After describing which one he was to my grandmother, she said that she saw him coming out of the hallway, but thought that he had just used the bathroom, which was in the same hall as mine and my sister's room. That's when we realized that he was nowhere to be found after he left the house. His mom never even showed up to get him. He was just gone. Then, I had to tell them more about him and why I didn't really like him, which was awkward as hell. So, after my mom did her thing and tracked his house down, his mom got him to admit what he had done. He really tried to light my sister, my whole house on fire for the fun of it. I didn't see him in school after that, but we did get an apology letter in the mail from his mom, as well as a gift card to replace some of the things that were lost. After that, my mom stopped doubting me when I told her I didn't like someone in my class. So, yeah, that's a few of the crazy events for you. That's literally why I tell my wife to just treat my birthday like every other day. That way, we're less likely to spontaneously combust or something. I might share some more birthday horror stories with you, if you ever want them. So, this happened on my 30th birthday. At that point in my life, I was still single and had nothing really significant going on in it. In fact, I lived with my mom as she was a paraplegic due to a car accident, so if I wasn't working, I was taking care of her. My grandmother also lived there and helped out, but she also had mobility issues. I'm thankful to have both wonderful women in my life, but I still did want a day or night off occasionally to myself. So, for my birthday, I just wanted to party, drink, and let loose a bit. Me and a couple of friends hit up a few local bars to start. We lived in a small town, so everyone knew everyone else. And this didn't really work for me, because that meant that the dating pool was low too. So I suggested that we go a town or two over. New area, new bars, new people, right? We got to one and pretty much got kicked out of it due to some stupid drama already taking place, and my friend adding to it. But we finally found this little club that had a local band playing, so there was an entry cost. It wasn't much, and we all agreed that there would probably be more people there too, so we went for it. The band was alright. It was 3 people, a drummer, a bassist, and then a singer that also played guitar and keyboard. They probably could have done without the keyboard because it sounded off and didn't really go with the songs. The singer also sounded like he'd already had his share of drinks and was slurring his words. If I had to describe it, it was like a weird mix of metal bands with an EDM sound, but just done really bad. But they were new to this, so props to them for putting themselves out there. After a few drinks, I was standing in the crowd towards the back, dancing in place to the music, as it did seem to get better with alcohol, when a guy walked over and stood next to me. I glanced over and smiled as he nodded, doing the same thing, and then said very loudly, "These guys suck." It was kind of harsh, sure, but it made me laugh pretty hard. We started talking the best we could over the music. We talked about our favorite bands, the worst concerts that we'd been to, and just stupid stuff like that. We then started doing stupid and old dances, like disco style, and we're getting stares from people, but we also had a few join in with us. We were having a blast, and even had the singer from the band come out and hang with us. We were all drinking and having a good time, and then my friends slowly left. Some of them had kids and had to work the next day, so I understood why. And they offered to take me home since I'd been drinking, but I wasn't ready to go home yet, so I declined and said I would figure it out later. When my friends were leaving and telling me happy birthday, others heard them, including my new guy friend, and that got me another round of drinks for free. We all did these shots and started dancing again. To be honest, this is kind of what I was wanting. I wanted to just get wasted and get stupid for the night. Possibly hook up, and I think this guy was figuring that out too, by the way he was acting at this point. The dancing, the touching, all of it. The only problem that I had was that I was not feeling good. I've been drunk before, but this was different. I felt dizzy and nauseous, and it was just like the room was spinning. I was trying to ignore it or move past it since this was my one night off. Shortly after, he asked me if I wanted to leave. I was pretty ready to go at that point, so thinking maybe afterwards I could get something to eat or take something and maybe start feeling better and then get home. It's not like I could drive myself anyways, so why not take the offer? I walked back up to the bar because I wanted to get a bottle of soda, something I often did after drinking, and as the lady was grabbing it, she asked me if I was okay. I kind of laughed because I thought that she was just joking, and I said I was fine. She then motioned for me to lean in and said something like, "Be careful. Don't be afraid to holler if you need help." Not knowing what she meant by this, I again just kind of laughed. I thanked her and paid for my soda and walked away. I walked back towards the guy and started talking about leaving when my phone started ringing. I noticed it was my mom, so I told him I had to take it since I was technically her caregiver and, of course, she's my mom. I walked to the restroom to answer it when my mom started freaking out. She said that my grandmother was having troubles breathing and that she needed to go to the hospital. She called an ambulance to come get her, of course, but she wouldn't be able to go without me taking her. I immediately started freaking out, and I told her I would get home as quickly as possible, and then hung up the phone. To my surprise, this guy was standing at the end of the hall to the restrooms waiting for me, smiling. Choking back tears, I told him I had to get home because my grandma had to go to the hospital. He first said he was sorry to hear about her, but then joked about it not being my responsibility, and kind of pulled me closer to him. Not many people know or understand how I live, so I didn't take offense, and I explained to him that I took care of them, so I had to go. Hell, I even offered to give him my number so we could continue this later. Instead, he got a little more pushy, saying that someone else could get her there and that they didn't need me to take her. I then insisted that that person was me. I looked after them. And then he started getting mad. He made a comment about how it was a piss-poor excuse to get out of going with him and that next time I shouldn't lead someone on like that if all they wanted were free drinks. Now, at this point, I'm still dizzy, drunk, flustered, and now I'm furious. I'm telling him that it wasn't an excuse and that he could go screw himself if he was that desperate. I started walking away from him and headed for the bar since it was closer to the back, as I was going to get an Uber being that I was drunk. And then the lady at the bar again asked me if I was alright. I kind of started laying it all on her as to what was going on, and she offered to take me home. I said I didn't want to bother her or take her out of work, but she insisted. She then mentioned that she was actually partial owner of the bar, so she could leave if she needed to, as someone else would be able to look after the place. I again told her that I appreciated it, and if I couldn't get an Uber, then I would take her up on her offer. As I started setting it up, that same guy walked up to me with a completely different demeanor. He apologized for his actions, and he said it was the alcohol, but offered to take me home since this was a serious situation. I accepted his apology and almost took him up on the offer, but since he'd been drinking too, and it affected his personality the way that it had, I thought it probably wouldn't be a good idea. I tried to phrase it that I didn't want to ruin his night and risk him driving somewhere that he didn't know, but then mentioned that we should try an actual date. I did like him otherwise. He was attractive and funny, but maybe he was just a better person when not under the influence. This again seemed to enrage him, and he started going off on me about being a gold digger, and that I was just mooching off of people. Dumb crap like that. My mom was now calling me back. I didn't know how to react to everything, so I just got sick. On the floor. And on this guy. Yeah. It was awful and embarrassing, but thankfully the lady ran around the other side of the bar and yelled at the guy to leave and started getting me to the restroom. After I got cleaned up, she insisted on taking me home at this point, and I agreed. My head was still all over the place, but I called my mom and told her that I was on my way, and she confirmed that they had picked up my grandma already and that she was stable. And this all took place in her truck, and after I got off the phone, she started explaining her actions. She said she had seen that guy there before, and that she'd always had an off feeling about him with the way that he would just constantly buy girls drinks, and sometimes he would end up leaving with them. Some would decline his offer, and he would always act the same way. He got irrationally angry at the girl until one of them would leave, or he was escorted out. However, this time, when he picked up a round of shots, she clearly saw him drop something in one of the glasses. She said she stopped and stared at him, and all he did was wink at her and walk off. And she watched as he handed me the drink and kept an eye on me from then on. That's why she asked how I was feeling. She was worried that he had drugged me. I told her I had felt sick and dizzy, which I didn't normally get like that, but I thought it was just because of the shots, since it was different from what I usually did. We got to my house, and I hugged her, and I thanked her for looking out for me. She gave me her phone number, and told me to call her if I needed help getting my car back home, but that it would be safe there until then, and I went inside. Just to add, my grandmother did turn out okay. I did get my car back with no issues, and even when the creepy guy found me on Facebook, I blocked him, and then never heard from him again. I don't know if he really did drug me, but either he did, and that explains why I felt the way that I did, or he at least got way too angry at the stupid things. Whichever one it was, I no longer wanted anything to do with him. However, it wouldn't be the last time that I would hear about him. I went to that same bar several months later with a friend, and the owner actually recognized me. She came over and told me some pretty shocking stuff. She had said that her bar, as well as a few others, had been investigated for reports of women being drugged, and it was traced back to those few local bars and clubs. She, of course, didn't have any physical proof, but she did explain to the investigators her concerns and suspects, and she actually helped with setting something up to catch this guy. They were successful, and he was not only arrested for that, but also ID'd by someone who was drugged and then assaulted by him. Sure enough, I went and looked and found a news article about it later that night confirming it. It was surreal to me that I was most likely targeted for the same kind of scheme, but had managed to make it out of a bad situation. So there's my story of me being stupid and probably selfish, too. Don't worry. I'm a lot more careful when I do go out now, and having my fiancé with me also helps out quite a bit. This happened back when I was a little 13-year-old girl. I was planning to go to a friend's house for her birthday party, and then 4 of us were going to be staying the night for a sleepover. I was getting to the point that I cared about my appearance, and I liked wearing makeup, so I packed a little backpack with my cutest outfits and makeup. I was excited to have a makeover with some of my best friends. I got to the party, and there were already about a dozen or so people there. My best friend Lacey was ready and waiting for me to arrive, and the birthday girl, Heather, greeted me and took the present from me. The theme for their birthday party was American Idol, if that tells you roughly the time frame that this took place. There were other mutual friends there as well, and some that I didn't really know, and also my crush. We had cake, and Heather opened the presents, and then we played some games, and she was kind enough to team me up with my crush as well. One of the gifts that she got was a karaoke machine, so once all the games were done, and we set that up and all took turns with our god-awful preteen singing and trying to find songs with curse words in it since we would be allowed to say them. As the party started dying down and people left, we would then be left with just the 4 of us. Me, Heather, Lacey, and Tamara. We helped clean up a bit, and then Heather's parents helped us get set up in her room. She had a bed big enough for 2, and they put an air mattress in there for the other 2. Her mom made us popcorn and laid out soda, basically saying we could have the run of the house, other than her bedroom, but after 10 we had to stay quiet as her dad would have to work early the next morning. She also had an older brother, but he had taken their van for the night, so it was just going to be us. We decided to watch a movie in the living room, a scary movie, of course, and then agreed to take it back to her bedroom so we could talk more and listen to music. We got set up in there, and we started talking about whatever young girls talked about. Boys, school, home life, rumors that we heard, things we wanted to try, and just stuff like that. Tamara had brought some teen magazines for us to read, and they had some different makeup and hairstyles that we all wanted to try on each other. We started doing each other's hair and makeup, and gossiping about some of the teachers and other people we didn't like, and just ultimately were having a lot of fun, when we heard a loud banging coming from outside. Heather lived in a neighborhood where the houses were all very similar and very close together. Their backyard was pretty much shared with her neighbor behind them, so when we heard the loud noise, she could pretty much pinpoint where it came from. And we also had the window open because it was cooler, so the sound was amplified as well. She mentioned her neighbors argued a lot, so they were probably just fighting at the time. We continued on with our night when we again started hearing another loud banging sound. And that's when Lacey turned the subject to them, asking if she's ever been able to hear what the arguments were about, if they ever got physical, or if they ever had to call the cops before. Heather assured us that it was never that bad, but they did just get loud, so sometimes she listened to them. She couldn't always make out what they were saying, but sometimes they took it outside where she could. Lacey was wanting to listen to it at this point, and she stopped mid-eyeshadow application to go to the window. We just kind of teased her for being so nosy, and tried to finish our makeup when Lacey said, "Your neighbor is kind of creepy." Heather tried to say something about them not being all that bad, but then Lacey cut her off, saying that he was trying to get in through the window. That stopped all of us, and we went over to the window to see. Sure enough, there was a guy trying to open one of the windows from the outside. He was pulling on the sides, and when nothing was happening, we saw him pull something out of his pocket. We still don't know if it was a knife or key or whatever, but we watched him slice the screen and then beat on the glass. I remember looking over at Heather to gauge her reaction, but she looked just as curious as us, but also a bit nervous. We continued to watch as the guy broke the window and started reaching around and climbing inside. Then, we saw a woman inside run to the window and start screaming at the guy. Once he got all the way in, she started shoving him back, and he grabbed her by the face or throat, and they moved away from the window. We couldn't see them at this point, but we could still hear them screaming. Looking at Heather again, and the fact that she looked scared, I asked her if we should tell someone, as that did not look like a normal fight, and she agreed. She ran to grab her home phone, and we continued to watch to see if they would come back to the window. After a while, Heather came back and asked nervously if she should call 911, as she's never had to do that before. Neither had any of us, so we didn't know if we should or if we should wake up her parents. We didn't want to bother anybody or get in trouble for calling 911, but as we discussed it, Lacey said, "He came back." So we all went back to the window and watched as the guy stopped at the window, looked down at something, and then walked over to the door next to the window and walked out of it. He seemed to stand there after he closed the door for several seconds, and then looked up at the sky and wiped his face. As he turned away from the door, he looked around and, to my horror, he looked right at us. That felt like forever as we all just sat there and stared back at each other. And now, it was still dark and there was a light above the door, but his facial features, we couldn't really make them out. Unfortunately, I don't know if we could say the same for him. The awkward stare was finally broken when he looked around and quickly ran away from the door. However, instead of running towards the driveway to leave, he walked towards Heather's house. I think we all noticed it at the same time and immediately moved away from the window, but Heather quickly ran out of the room. We then followed her to the living room where she was checking the front door to see if it was locked. As we all stood there trying to figure out what was going on, we started hearing the doorknob rattling. I think it was Tamara that let out a small yelp of sorts, and I was just frozen in fear. Lacey looked out the window and confirmed that it was the guy, and I remember that I started crying. I thought we had just witnessed something that we shouldn't, and now we were next. I ran back to Heather's room, planning to hide in the closet or under the bed, when I heard Heather yell and run into her parents' room, banging on their door. I was just standing in the bedroom at the time, so I heard them open the door and ask what was wrong. And Heather tried to explain as she pulled them to the living room. I followed behind them. Lacey was now frozen, standing back towards the kitchen entryway, and Tamara was crying too. Heather's dad had a booming voice and said something like, "You have 5 seconds to get off my property before I blow you to pieces." As he was saying this, her mom made us all go back down the hallway where the bedrooms were, and we could hear him opening the door. I heard him yelling as he ran outside, while her mom made us all stay back. At this point, I had grabbed the phone from her room and gave it to her mom, and she called the cops. They showed up, and we had to explain what we had seen, but apparently we weren't the only ones that called. Someone else had called the cops too, so while they were talking to all of us, there were cops at the neighboring house, and the house next door where the scene had taken place. It was a little hard to sleep after that. As it turns out, the guy actually was her old neighbor, or at least her neighbor's boyfriend, as he didn't actually live there anymore. He tried and successfully broke in, and she caught him doing it. He had apparently strangled her and stabbed her, but she managed to survive, probably because of everyone else that called the cops on him. It was really strange because it wasn't a bad neighborhood or anything like that. So it was unsettling for something like that to happen. Tamara wasn't allowed over there at night anymore, but mine and Lacey's parents were still cool about it. Hell, I don't blame them. It's not like it was their fault either. But we definitely made jokes about it growing up, about how she had one hell of a birthday party. Thankfully, that guy went to jail for a long time, so I do hope he's forgotten our faces, and that we never meet again. So this was a collection of birthday horror stories, almost a week after my birthday, whenever they were supposed to be posted. I was trying to be cheeky and put out birthday stories on my birthday, and guess what? I failed miserably. I failed. I accept that. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video despite my horrible condition. My voice, the way my voice sounds, what I meant to say. If I may though, guaifenesin is a godsend of a pill. If you don't know what guaifenesin is, Mucinex, essentially. Holy crap, that stuff is amazing. Without it, I would sound even worse. So, huge thank you to guaifenesin. Guaifenesin, I love you. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, I understand. You can also subscribe if you're new to the channel. I promise you, this is not the normal sound of my voice. Normally, I narrate much more subtle, much more, or much less scratchy, and much more comfortably for your ears. But yeah, it is what it is. Also, you can hit that comment. What? Also, you can go leave a comment on my video if you feel so inclined to let me know your thoughts, including comments like, "Geez, Raven, why did you even make this video? Your voice sounds terrible. You sound like you're dying. You sound like a cat on a manifold of an old car, screeching, howling as the car starts because it got hot." Please don't leave that comment. That would actually hurt my soul. Anyways, I hope I see you guys on the next video. If not, I get it. And I hope you have a beautiful day. That one is non-negotiable. Yeah, but of course, until then, my friends, sleep well.